We're going to give you a short demonstration of our asset investment management software, starting with our map view. So this takes us to what we call our map dashboard page, and it's one of the most powerful displays within the application. There's a lot of information that can be visualized at the same time on this display. So the map is automatically centered around the available assets in the system and for which assets the user has permissions to see. So if you were in Northern Powergrid and you could only see Northern Powergrid's assets, then all the assets will be centered around those two license areas. So you don't get a big map of the world and have to zoom in. You might also want to restrict permission for a grouping of assets. So we've had users who potentially only see the overhead line assets or just one asset class like transformers, and you would just get to see those assets which you've been allocated to as part of the permissions. So this is a UK map and it uses sample assets and sample data. So the circles on the map, we call them donuts, which makes us feel hungry, and they represent groups of assets. And the numbers in the middle are the volume of assets within that area. So, for example, we have 12 assets over in this Norwich area. And the size of the donut is also proportionate to the number of assets. The colours are using a traffic light system. So we generally represent green for good, OK is obviously orange, and poor is red. And at the minute, these displays are configured to show the asset health in this way. And we can click on a grouping and we see some pop-ups and things, different asset groupings, and you can see how many assets are in that poor health category for that particular grouping. And we can configure these pop-ups as well to display whatever it is you like for that. I'm going to dive straight into an asset. Given that I've shown you a bit of the methodology, I'm going to actually search for an asset and just show you. We'll explore this screen a little bit more in a minute, but I'm just going to use this search feature. So if you know the name of the asset or the asset identifier, you can go directly to an asset, and it will show you that on a map. So this particular asset is an EHV transformer, an air transformer, an EHV switchgear circuit breaker, and this asset's 56 years old. It's also got an expected life of 56, so it's about the time when you'd be thinking about doing something to that asset, and that's reflected in the health, which is 7.15. So on a scale of 0.5 to 10, around about 5.5 is starting to get towards the point of critical degradation, the onset of critical degradation, and from there the asset ages quite quickly. But we can take a closer look at this asset, and we can just click into it. There we go. And so on this display, we've got this diagram which shows the methodology. Now, if we look sort of in the middle of the screen, we've got this initial health index and the inputs going into that initial health index, which are the location, the duty, and the asset age. Now, the way that the models work is that a factor is something that's used to influence the health of an asset. So factors above 1 are detrimental to the asset and increase the health, and assets below 1 decrease the health. So we can see for this asset, it's in a good location because it has a factor of 0.9, and the duty is sort of neutral. So it means that it's in line with a normal asset, but it's 56 years old. And the fact that it's reached its expected life means that it gets a health index of 5.5, the initial health index of 5.5. Added to this, to make our true health index, our condition-based health index, we have observed and measured condition modifiers. So we can see that this has no observable condition that was indicated as poor, so that's good. But on the measured condition, the factor is 1.3. So that 1.3 is then used in combination with this 5.5 to create the health index. See over here that we've got a reliability factor of 1.3 as well, and that also contributes. So we look at the highest factors. So 1.3 times 5.5 is the 7.15. And like I say, we go through a calibration process to make sure that these numbers are correct. From there, the health index, we have a formula where we derive the probability of failure for the asset. So these are all the things that we saw on the left-hand side of the schematic previously. And then on the right-hand side, we saw security of supply, or we call it network performance in this instance, the financial consequence of failure, which is the impact if the asset fails and how much it costs to replace that asset or to refurbish that asset if it's not a catastrophic failure. We've got safety consequences, which is the possibility of injuring somebody, and we also have environmental consequences as well. And they contribute to a total consequence of failure value, which we multiply together with the probability of failure to get our risk. So that's a sort of snapshot of how the models work, and most of the asset classes are formulated in this sort of structure, but the actual how we determine the observed or measured condition, there's a lot more detail that goes on behind that, and obviously quite a lot of algorithms for each asset. So on this screen as well, we've got our little map view in the middle there, and there's no photos associated with this particular asset, but we can add photos in as well. So snaps if they're relevant, and there's also documents as well which you can associate with the asset. And then we've got the map, and you can link to assets of the same type as well, or you could link to view that asset only, and you can view assets in the same region. And then from here you can actually click on a different asset and have a look at what a different asset means. So this asset is quite different, and hopefully with that bit of knowledge you'll see that this is quite a new asset. It's got low health, low factors, and so it's got a low health index overall. So ultimately its risk is also quite low, and you can investigate and navigate the models in that way. So we'll go back and have a look at our map dashboard in a bit more detail. So let's go back in this way. Okay, so this is now a zoomed out version of this dashboard. So on this screen, just so that we've got a bit more detail, so over here we've got say assets in Liverpool, and we can go and have a look at those. So these assets are grouped together in terms of the clustering, and we can define the different layers of the clustering. So we've got 34 assets up here, and we can see those. They're located in a single location, so that's why they appear like that. And then over on the left hand side we've got the slider bar. So at the minute we're 2021, but you can actually move it forward, say, to 2036, or even all the way across to 2046. And as you do that, you can see that this is a no intervention sort of scenario. On here you can see that different numbers of assets turn red, and you can see all of those appear. So in this spiral, the different colours mean the different health indices, and the different symbols mean the different equipment types. Okay, so let's put that back and we'll zoom out again and take another look at some more of the functionality. Okay, so we've also got different filters on here. So in these filters you can select all of the assets, or you can go down and select just a particular type of asset that you might be interested in. So these are just selected towers. So if we go, say, over here, we can go in and have a look. So there's no assets in poor health over here. But when we zoom in a bit, we can see our towers and we've got their different asset health sort of RAG statuses, the red, amber, green statuses. When you click on these, you can see more information about the asset, how old it is, etc., and we can configure these views. And the other thing that we can do from here is that we can look at, we've got a view to look at the street view. And when you do this, not all assets are in the right place in terms of near a road, so you might just need to pick up the little person and move them towards the road, and you can normally see approximately where the assets are. So while it doesn't give you an indicator of the health of the asset, what it does do is, if you're doing some planned works and things, you might want to have a look and see what the geography is like in the area. Is there room for parking? Is there room for equipment or vans and things like that? So it'll give you a bit of a view on that. Okay. So back to our tower line. So it's interesting, this line, that we've got quite a lot of amber, and then we've got now a section of green, and it could be that because these are close to the coast, they're just aging a little bit more quickly due to the sort of salt spray, or they could be slightly older towers. But you can go into each one in the same way as we did that switchgear asset, and you can take a look and see what's going on. Okay, so we'll put the assets back on. A few other bits and pieces. So we have some additional pop-ups and things that we can configure these to whatever preferences there are, and these have just got a few details about risk and health. You can obviously search for the asset, as I mentioned, and we can have different backgrounds and things on our map. So this is quite an interesting feature that we've been exploring through some of the customers that we've been working with so far. And we've started putting different layers on the map. So layers representing things like flood risk areas or wildfire regions or corrosion zones or areas of outstanding natural beauty or protected environments and things. But we'd envisage that the different layers could be used for other things as well, so things like electrical schematics or gas pipeline routes or depot regions. So wherever there's data, they can be added to the map as well. So that's the map dashboard page. As you can see, it's quite a powerful page, and when we've shown people this, they've been quite surprised about how much information is there. So even if they haven't got a health index built for an asset class, just how the assets are represented on the map is actually a really useful thing. And we can bring in more data. So you could have, at the asset level, you could have data of next maintenance, or you could have data replacement or other activities and things like that which popped up. And you could even have additional things that were unrelated to the asset health, but actually were important to keep together as information and presented on this kind of a map. So there's quite a lot you can do on there, and there's sort of something for different types of people within the organisations. Okay, so we'll come off that for a minute, and we'll look at just one or two of the other displays. Now, obviously, with us modelling everything by asset, there's an infinite number of displays. So we're just showing you examples of those. So one example is looking at the asset health, and again here we've got different categories of assets, and we can see different health moving up on our 1 to 10 scale. The assets that appear over in HI11 are those which we allow to move to that on a future year. If you set some filters, they do move with the pages as well, so you can look at particular asset classes and move with the pages, and these asset displays are interactive as well, so you can look down and say, right, which of my 19 EHV switchgear in HI5, and you can click in and see a tabular view of those assets. And this has a bit more information about what they are. And from here again, you can click in and you can have a look at the algorithm viewer that sits behind that, and you can see what's going on with particular assets. And again, you've got all that functionality. So everything looks, links together pretty well. I can show you the assets page as well. So again, this is just a tabular view. So this is quite a traditional view of the way that the assets might be represented, which is great for sort of ad hoc analysis and doing other things. And there's a little export button here, so you can export it, download it into a CSV or something else if you choose to. The solution also has models. So these are the models that are, actually I'm going to show you these models. So the models that sit behind those high-level dashboards are configured individually, and they show all of the data for all of the asset classes. But in here we also look at asset class by asset class. So we can pick, say, EHV switchgear, and we can look at the real detail that sits behind this. And I've just chosen to show you a common methodology model just so that you can see some of the displays. So again, we've got quite similar tabular views that sit there, and these all build together, so you get all the detail of things like the expected life, what the location is like, the initial health score, and then we move all the way through to results, and you can see results for assets, categories, and we can do all sorts of graphs and things like that in there. And I'll just show you one with a bit more graphical view on this one. So this is our sort of AIM standard model, where we've got, again, similar tabular views for health, probability of failure, consequence risk. So all the detail is in there, but this particular one just has slightly more results in terms of the interventions. So this one has a percentage replacement and a sort of target, which is like a custom replacement program, and we can do things like show obviously tabular results, and we can show graphs and things like that in these views, and you can see things like health profiles for the current and future year, and there's an infinite number of displays that makes up individual models. But the important thing is we get these models right, and then the results get used on the dashboards, and you can have different permissions for editing the models and calibrating the models as you do for viewing the data on the dashboard as well. So it's all completely configurable. Okay, so I guess the last thing really to show you is just some more detail about the investment scenarios. So when I was saying before that we've got a number, we can do different scenarios. One of the things that we're able to do is do different styles of scenarios for the same asset class and see what happens, so that we can compare to see whether a certain type of investment scenario is better or worse than another one. So what we have on here is we've got this set up for circuit breakers in this example, but we've got a whole series of graphs that shows KPIs over a 25-year period, and the no investment line is represented in green. So for example, if you look at the failure rate, we can see what happens if you choose not to invest in that asset class at all. And then there's a dark blue line, which is a percentage replacement. Now, we wouldn't recommend necessarily a percentage replacement for, you know, your very high value, complicated assets. But if you've got things like conductors or LV equipment and stuff like that, getting an idea of the volumes of replacement and understanding what that does to the profile is quite useful. So if you just replace 2% a year, which is a 50-year lifespan approximately for each asset, then it keeps your number of the failure rates in this example, it keeps the failure rates pretty flat. And in fact, the percentage replacement scenarios, looking at the average age and the risk, it's all pretty flat. However, we have a problem when it comes to the cost, because it's quite expensive. So just doing that monotonous replacement is one of the most expensive ways of keeping the flat baseline. But if you were interested in particularly in, say, reliability over cost, then that might be a scenario which is appealing. There's a traditional age-based replacement in here, and again, it might be appropriate for certain types of assets. Certain types of assets might be still, that approach might be useful. If you haven't got any other data and you want to understand the volumes, that might be something that you want to look at. But then we've got some of our more sophisticated investments. So we've got an NPV profile in here, and this profile keeps things moderately under control, so reasonably flat. The age is not too bad, number of failures is good, but it's cost optimized, so it's a much less high cost option. So those are the sorts of things we can do for replacement, but like I say, we've done quite a lot of different scenarios as well for refurbishments, and looking at how fast assets are aging compared to their life and whether or not they would benefit from refurbishment as opposed to replacement and things like that. Thanks for watching. If you want more information, please contact us using the information shown here.